One of the hallmarks of really curious people is their willingness and ability to turn their curiosity on themselves, to wonder why it is that they behave the way they do, the way they respond differently at different times to different inputs and scenarios. And so in this session, we're going to do a deep dive into self-awareness. And in order to go into self-awareness, and you might call it mindfulness, we need to have a look at our thinking. One of the things we all have in common, we are all thinking 24/7, but clearly the quality of those thoughts varies quite significantly. So with that said, let's start here with the idea of a bit of a squiggly line. And what I'm suggesting here is, as I just said, that the quality of our thinking varies from moment to moment. We have good days, we have bad days. Good moments, bad moments. On a good day, we tend to see things with a lot of perspective. We can see the big picture easily. But on a bad day, the opposite happens. We tend to become myopic, and by this I mean we have a very short, narrow focus of vision. On a bad day, this problem feels overwhelming. We can't see past it. We feel resourceless, we feel frustrated because this problem seems insurmountable. And then we go and have lunch, or we go home and have a sleep, or whatever it may be. We have a little break, we walk away, and we come back and all of a sudden we're wondering what the fuss was about. The problem's still there, but now that we've jumped up into our high quality thinking, the problem's still there, but we can see past it. We can see it in perspective. And we're wondering, what's the big deal? And I'm going to suggest that this is the human condition, that everybody on the planet moves between these two extremes. Now, there's a lot of variation, obviously. Most of us, the difference between a good day and a bad day is not too extreme. Not too extreme, but we've all met a loved one or family member, as somebody who tends to be quite extreme. Their good days and bad days can be quite extreme, and they can happen like that. They can happen in a flash. So if we expand that little line there to something much bigger, and we suggest here that the quality of our thinking, and let me be really clear about this, I'm not talking about what we are thinking, I'm talking about how we happen to be thinking. The quality of our thinking moves up and down a continuum constantly fluctuating up and down this continuum. Now, someone who might represent the very highest levels of thought, and there'd be many examples of this, I'm sure. For some of you, it might be Jesus or Allah or Buddha or these sorts of things, but I've been reading a bit about Zen Buddhism of late. Now, I'm not a Buddhist, and I'm certainly not going to be trying to teach Buddhism or anything like that, but the Zen Buddhists have had a good head start. They've been talking and reading and thinking about this for thousands of years. And what the Zen says is this: we are thinking, from the moment we are born, we are thinking 24/7. We could argue we start thinking before we're even born, but we are constantly generating thoughts. You cannot control it, you cannot stop it. If you're not thinking, strictly speaking, you're dead. There's no such thing as not thinking. Thinking at night, we call it dreaming, and the Zen would say it's the same thing. It's just thinking at night time. And so the Zen says we are thinking 24/7 from the moment we're born until the moment we pass on. Then they say this: you are the author of every thought you have ever generated. No one can sneak up to you and pour a thought in your ear when you're not paying attention. Now, of course, yes, we can be influenced by other people's thinking. I accept that. But at the end of the day, you still generate the response to that. You are the author of every thought you've ever had. And so the Zen takes that one step further and says, because of this nature of thought, what we experience in life out there, in many respects, is our thinking reflected back at us. Now, I know that sounds a little bit weird. Let me see if I can give you an example of that. Imagine we had someone thinking pessimistically and someone thinking optimistically. So we had two people, could be the same person by the way, but let's say it's two different people at different times of the day. And we send them downstairs to have lunch together. They go to the same restaurant, they eat exactly the same food served by the same wait person, and then they go for a walk around the block before coming back into the room and sharing their experience. What are you going to hear? Someone thinking pessimistically, someone thinking optimistically. Well, pretty obviously we're going to hear two quite different stories. For the pessimist, it might be the food was pretty average, the service was lousy, and I can't believe it's raining again. And the optimist jumps up and says, well, I thought the food was fine and the service was fine, and isn't it great it's raining again? And so these two people could look at, and I'll just use a prop here, these two people could look at exactly the same thing and have a different experience of it. Because no matter what the pessimist looks at, it's going to look like a problem. And the optimist looks at the same thing and sees an opportunity. And this is what the Zen is saying, that what we experience out there is our thinking reflected back at us. When I'm thinking pessimistically, what I see is problems. When I'm thinking optimistically, what I see is opportunity. So if we said this, we said that for the Zen, experience is an inside going out process. How I'm thinking determines what I experience. Now, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not qualified to talk about the very worst, the bottom of the line there. So we're going to leave that alone, talking about the worst psychoses and things. And we'll just come up the line a little bit to around about here. And this is where you might hear someone say something like this. You shouted at me when you came home, and that's why I'm disappointed. You made me. Or you didn't smile at me when you came into the office this morning. That's why I'm upset. And once again, you made me. And these people would be saying, look, life is actually quite simple. People do stuff and I respond to it. If you had smiled at me, I would have been happy. If you had whatever, it'd be quite different. And so here we have people at the other extreme saying the exact opposite. What they're saying is experience is an outside-in process. People do stuff that makes me think like this. I'm simply responding to my environment. Or if I was to use stronger language, I'm a victim to my environment. And I'm going to suggest that we all do both. This is being human. We move between these two extremes. It fluctuates, constantly fluctuating. As I said before, for most of us it's relatively subtle, but for some it's quite extreme. So how's this relevant to us? Well, think about this. Imagine if there was a halfway mark somewhere, a halfway line that separated healthy thinking from unhealthy thinking. Well, it's important to recognize this mark because when we drop below a certain level of thinking, a certain quality of thinking, there are severe consequences. The first, unfortunately, is we lose the ability to think logically. Now, this might sound a little bit weird, but have you ever had this experience? Have you ever had an argument with someone that's not thinking logically? And no matter what you say, it's like straight over the top of their head. And there's a pretty good chance that you tried to use logic to get them to see your point of view, which if you think about it is illogical. How can you use logic on someone that's not thinking logically? It doesn't work like that. If I can give an example, this would be 15 years ago, I think. A very dear friend of my wife's and mine, her partner got up and left. He'd been having an affair for about a year, no one knew about this, and he took off, leaving her at home with 3 kids. Anyone would be devastated. Anyone would be devastated by that. So my wife and I and other close friends, we went round to offer support where we could, and this poor woman, she was just in absolute despair. She was terrified, she was hurt, she was angry, she was, you name it, everything was going on. So we tried to offer help where we could, but nothing seemed to help very much. But about 2 days later, when I was around at her place, there was a moment where she paused and she said, I wonder what I missed. You know, he was having this affair for a year and I just didn't even see it. So I'm wondering if, did I have something to do with this a little bit? And it was like just for a moment that she looked over the line, that she just saw things from a slightly different perspective. Now, it didn't last long. Within about a minute, she was back into wishing that he'd die a very slow, painful death. But she did this frequently. She seemed to get a bit of perspective and then drop back into it. And then a bit of perspective and then drop back into it. About 3 weeks after he had left, I went round to her place and she was in an effervescent high, bubbly. And I said to her, what's changed? And she said, oh, Andrew, I found a solution to all my problems. And as a professional educator, I thought, this is great. Let's get this, we'll bottle it, we'll make a fortune. And I said, so what's happened? And she said, well, I've seen the root cause of all my problems. Really, what is that? And she said, oh, I'll never date men again. And while some of you may think that she had her finger on the pulse, I would suggest that she just completely missed the point. And this is what I mean by illogical thinking, right? That we just lose the ability to track things in a logical, sensible way. So that's the first issue when we drop below this halfway mark. The second is we lose our ability to listen. We'll take the first, 7th and 23rd word they said, reverse the order of them, and repeat back what we wanted to hear. We don't listen for intent, we interpret what they're saying. And we are literally incapable at that moment of doing deep empathic listening. And if we put those two things together, we could argue that effectively, temporarily, our IQ diminishes. We start making very poor quality decisions, thinking that we're being brilliant, but just missing the point.